El Señor esté con ustedes.
Y con tu espíritu.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke. Mary set out and traveled to the hill country in haste to a town of Judah, where she entered the house of Zechariah and greeted Elizabeth. When Elizabeth heard Mary's greeting, the infant leaped in her womb, and Elizabeth, filled with the Holy Spirit, cried out in a loud voice and said, "Most blessed are you among women, and blessed is the fruit of your womb. And how does this happen to me, that the mother of my Lord shall come to me? For at that moment the sound of your greetings reached my ears. The infant in my womb leaped for joy. Blessed are you who believed that what was spoken to you by the Lord would be fulfilled." And Mary said, "My soul proclaims the greatness of the Lord. My spirit rejoices in God, my Savior." The Gospel of the Lord.
On Wednesday, we celebrated the feast of St. Juan Diego and told a little bit about the story about how this beautiful image of Our Lady came to be. And I promised that today I'd kind of unpack the image a little bit as to what people would have understood when they first saw it, right? So I'm just going to stand over here for a little bit and talk about this beautiful lady. Kind of pick up where we left off, that Juan Diego has captured all these beautiful roses from the hill of Tepeyac in his mantle that Our Lady kind of miraculously put there. And now he's brought them to the bishop in order to be proof that, yes, Mary, in fact, has been visiting, and she does have a plan to build a beautiful shrine on top of this hill. As he drops the roses, this image is unveiled for the first time. It has lots of significance all wrapped up in one place. It, first of all, would have appealed to the Franciscan bishop who was formed in Spain and had a very Catholic environment that he saw the world in. We've also got a whole Aztec nation that's going to be able to interpret this as an Aztec pictogram with lots of different symbols that are very definitive, right? They're very clear. This symbol means this thing. It's like Egyptian hieroglyphs, right? And they would have been able to look at that image, right side up, upside down, like say different things to them depending on the orientation of the image, all these different things. So first, for the Catholic bishop who sees this, he knows immediately, like, oh, this looks just like the Blessed Virgin Mary and how she might appear. It's very obvious to us because we've all seen this image probably hundreds, maybe thousands of times. She's in a posture of Christian prayer. She's very humble. She's very modest. She's got an angel that's sort of proclaiming her, and this symbol of the moon, right? A woman clothed in the sun, right here. She's radiant, all this splendor, with the moon under her feet. We hear in Revelation chapter 12. It would have been very quick for them to say, that's Mary. But the Aztec cultural significance here is overwhelming. So first, the color of her garments, right? The inner tunic is a kind of clay color like the earth. And the print is full of plants, different flowers. Right? So she's clothed in this kind of reddish color, which in classic iconography, if we go back to the Catholic side, that red is divinity and blue is humanity. Or is it the other way? Wait a minute. Now I've confused myself. I think it is. I think it's the other way. Yeah. So the blue is the divinity, right? It's Mary's humanity clothed in Jesus' divinity, right? But this would have been kind of the color of the earth out of which this garden is growing. And then her blue outer mantle, bedecked with the stars, right? Signifying the heavens and divine things. You see this probably the most significant plant here, right? And it's growing out of the sky, if you will, right? The stems all kind of lead straight to that blue piece. It's the heavens coming to the earth. Right? And if you were to turn it around, it would look like a heart. And these different, what you call like the main arteries that come out of the heart, right? The heavens have come down to earth in order to lead the people of earth, to lead hearts back to heaven. There's even, so there's a lot going on here. Over her womb is a Mexican daisy or jasmine, I can't remember now. But first of all, we'll start from the top a little bit and work our way down. She's got a part in the middle of her hair, which would have meant that she's a virgin. Like, okay, she's a virgin. But this cincture around her waist would have meant that she's pregnant, right? She's a virgin who's pregnant. That's peculiar. And then this little flower that I mentioned that's right over the center of her womb is significant to them to mean the center of the universe and infinity, right? So you have a virgin who's pregnant with God. And as the Aztecs are starting to explain this to the missionaries, they're going, oh yeah, okay, that's great. Now it's going to be really easy to explain to them who the Virgin Mary is and what she's all about. The cuffs on her garment and the color of her outer mantle were only used for royalty and divinity, right? And all of their imagery, right? So they can tell that she's a princess. Her complexion is one that would have been familiar to them. It's not one of the Spaniards. It's not one of the indigenous Aztecs either. It's a mix, right? She's called a mestiza, right? Which was kind of a name that was initially kind of like a slur against mixed race little babies that would have grown up in a culture, right, where we had these mixed cultures coming together. They would have been looked down upon, right? Because they would have been like, unwanted children. But here, Mary comes like one of them and as an Aztec princess, right? So she's got a lot to say about that topic, right? She's here to help bring these cultures together. She's here to promote unity and to be able to promote the gospel. If you see here, she's got a little brooch on her collar, and there's a small black cross on that brooch. Now, the cross wasn't significant in Aztec culture, but of course it was for the missionaries. And they would have shown up with big black crosses on their sails, right? So it would have been an immediate signifier to the Aztecs to be able to see it and go, oh, she's with them, or they're with her, or something. But that would have been another clue for them. The stars, right? The Aztecs were good astronomers. We were familiar with the Mayan calendar that had so much attention a few years back because they thought, well, maybe the Mayans knew something about the end of the world and their calendar came to an end, so maybe that means that's it. But they really were excellent mathematicians and astronomers. And so they were familiar with the stars and the constellations and the designs that they would make. The stars on her mantle look like they're just sort of in rows and columns, but they're not. You can connect the dots and you can find all the constellations in the night sky. As the night sky appeared from December 9th to December 12th, almost 500 years ago, the same night sky as when she appeared. The interesting thing about that is because the stars always kind of have the same relationship to each other, and playing the connect the dots game and figuring out, you would be able to predict where the stars are on the back side of the image, even though there isn't a back of the image, where the stars would be on the back of Mary's garment. And there's a Leo, the lion, is over her womb, right? Jesus is called the Lion of Judah. Over her immaculate heart on the backside, been Virgo, the Virgin. And on the back side of her head, where the mantle is, the constellation Corona, right? Like a crown. She's a queen. At the bottom you see this angel, right? He's got angel's wings, which the colors of his wings are remarkably similar to the Mexican flag nowadays. And he's got receding hairline, which means he's older, which means he's wise, so he should be listened to. And in one hand he's got her inner garment, and one hand he's got the outer garment, proclaiming her as queen of heaven and earth. Right? So some other really big Aztec stuff, Mayan stuff that would have been immediately available to them. This crescent moon that we talked about, it's their second highest god. His symbol is a crescent moon. He's a feathered serpent, right? Is who this Quetzalcoatl, if my memory serves me right. And so Mary is standing on an image of a serpent. Does that sound familiar? Right. And notice you can only see one of her feet and a knee protruding, right? She is stomping on the head of the serpent, right? She's also standing in front of the sun, right? So she's blocking out the sun, which is their highest divinity that they worshipped. So she's bigger than both of their biggest god. She's stomping on the head of their second highest god. But she herself is a posture of prayer, right? So she is not a god. She's not a goddess. She's not to be worshipped because gods don't pray to other gods, right? There's all these things that are coming through them. You see how she's like playing both sides of it so effortlessly, so beautifully, right? And it just by understanding the image, you can see how easy it would be for people to gather around her and to find unity here, to find common ground, to allow the cultures to be integrated and come together peacefully. Now, the fascinating thing about this image too is it was on some really rough cloth. It was made from something kind of like cactus fibers, and it's not meant to last a long time. Maybe 8 to 10 years, especially the way that it would have been used. But it wound up, it's still there today, the original, right? And for years, it wasn't like framed or under glass or being protected. In fact, it was out on display where people could come and touch it. They would bring flowers, and so there would be pollen and dust. Bring lots of candles around it, so you'd have soot and like ultraviolet light and stuff coming from the candles that's really damaging to things. You go to a museum today and they don't even let you use a flash to take a picture of something. So imagine if you have a series of small fires burning around it for years. Right? And it wasn't for decades that they finally said, maybe we ought to start trying to do our best to make sure we preserve this. Right? She keeps speaking to us even today. Right? Of all these ancient symbols that helped a culture to find a way to make their way together almost 5 centuries ago. But, when Mexico was going through a lot of political upheaval, there was an anarchist who brought a bomb disguised in a plant, right? Oh, we're going to offer this nice little offering to Our Lady. And as it exploded, it shattered all the windows in the basilica. There was a big bronze crucifix that sat in front of the image, and it's still on display in the basilica today. It's bent over in half. The bomb blast totally warped the metal, and the image was unfazed, completely unfazed. And two of my favorite things. One of them is modern science has been allowed to run a few tests. They try to figure out what was the pigment that was used. How did they make the paint that formed this image? Which artist, right? They took x-rays thinking they'd find an undersketch, which would be like how you would kind of start making an image like this. It's not there. They can't find any brush strokes. They analyzed the pigment. They said, okay, is this from an animal, from a plant, from a mineral? What did they use to make this paint? And the answer that science came back with was, it's not an animal or plant or a mineral. Right? Which is, by the way, like when you play 20 questions back in 100 years ago, that's kind of where you started, Is it a plant? No. Is it an animal? No. Is it a mineral? Well, it's got to be one of those things, right? Science saying that it's not one of those things, the science is a really nice way of saying whatever that thing is made of is not from this earth. Right? Perhaps one of the most amazing things, as science continues to progress and be able to zoom in tight on different details, so you zoom in on her eyes. And her eyes, right, if I took a high-powered lens and I zoomed in on your eye, I would see a reflection of me with my camera looking at you. Right? Because your eye has a lens and it reflects, right? It receives light and it reflects light. And your eye is round, so it would warp the image, right? Like a fisheye lens, or if you had like a Christmas bulb or something you saw your reflection in, it wouldn't look like a flat mirror. And if we had one bulb over here and one bulb over here, the reflections would be slightly different, right? So it's the same with the human eye. The image that you can see in her eye is the same, but it's just a little bit different because it's a different angle. It's warped just slightly differently. And it's what she would have seen, if you will, in the room that day, right? She sees the bishop and his assistants and other people gathered in the room, a family. It's this incredible, ridiculous thing. The first time that they started doing this work and they started zooming in tight, they brought in an ophthalmologist with his equipment. And he's dialing into her eyes to figure out exactly what's going on in there. And he turned white, passed out, fell on the floor. When he came to, they asked him, "What happened? Is everything okay?" His response, the man who spends his life every day looking at a human eyeball, was, "She's looking at me." There's something about her that's still speaking to us today. Right? She's still speaking to us about needing to find a way to come together around her, right? With all of our differences, with all of our objections to one thing or another, with all of the poverty and injustice that goes on in the world, that she stands in the middle of it, right? Magnifying her Son. My soul proclaims the greatness of the Lord. And my soul magnifies the Lord is the more direct translation there. That word magnify doesn't mean to make something bigger. You can't make God bigger. But what you can do is you can make God easier to see. Right? A magnifying glass doesn't make the letters on the page bigger. It makes them look bigger. It makes them easier to see. Nobody makes God easier to see than the Blessed Virgin Mary. And I would humbly submit that maybe in particular, Our Lady of Guadalupe. And it reminds us of our call. It reminds us of how we're supposed to be present in the world. The way we're called to live, the way we're called to love, is simply to try and make God easier for people to see. By the way that we treat each other, by the way we recognize the dignity of each other. God knows that we fail at this. God knows that I fail at this. Right? But let her be a reminder to us today that He's present with us in each moment. He's present to us through each other. Right? And so for us to strive just a little bit better, if we can just grow a little bit in this today, and maybe again a little bit more tomorrow, towards recognizing His presence in one another, I think it can bring a lot of healing that we need. It can bring a lot of peace that we need.